Today I want to do something a little bit different and bring you a summary of the ability sandbox changes coming in Heresy. We have a lot of great updates coming to the ability sandbox in episode Heresy. Most of these are for Arc. We're getting updates to Amplify, giving it damage resistance. We're getting a whole new verb. It's like Ignition's called Bolt Charge. All three subclasses are getting changes, but we're also getting a new aspect for Titans and Warlocks on Arc. We're also getting a new aspect for Hunters on Void. On top of that, we're getting a little bit of Solar, Stasis, and Strand updates. Now, all these changes are very exciting, and I'm also going to provide you with what I recommend as the builds I'm most excited about based on these subclass sandbox updates. I'm not doing full build videos on them yet because I don't think they're ready, and I don't want to show you game footage unless it's what you're actually looking forward to playing. So you'll see those in the future once Heresy launches, but for now I'm going to give you what I'm planning to run. If all that sounds good to you, let's get into it. I'm Engineer. Okay, first, so we are going to get straight into the Arc changes. And first, we're going to start with Amplified. This has finally been buffed. Literally, people have been asking for this buff since Arc 3.0 came out. And it gives 15% damage resistance in PvE. And on top of that, while you're amplified, enemies are less accurate against you. We actually have this effect on a few things like the Manticore, Exotic SFG, but this is a little bit fuzzy thing, but I think it's going to be really great for Arc, and it fits the theme perfectly. Now, how do you get amplified? If you weren't aware, you need to get rapid arc kills that can be weapon or ability, as long as you have one arc ability or aspect equipped. And that does not include thruster on Titans. Amplified is going to last for 15 seconds, which is a very long duration for something that can be damage resistance. And this is going to make arc abilities just a staple on Prismatic, because it's really easy to get that arc multi-kill, and all you need is just one arc ability or aspect. It's going to be great. You can see some snips from Destiny Data Compendium here. Amplified also will be providing you plus 50 mobility, longer slide distance, more handling, and a shorter reload duration multiplier, which is all great things on top of the brand new damage resistance. If you go to the Destiny Data Compendium before Heresy launches, they have started incorporating these updates now. That's what these snippets show here. So keep in mind that some of these things won't be happening for another week and a half or so from when this video launches. Now, our brand new Arc verb, because Arc actually needed more verbs, it had the least of every subclass in the game. The new one is Bolt Charge, and this is like an Arc Ignition, but it stacks on you, not on the enemy. It's generally going to be better for team play, because it's going to be easier to give it to your allies, and it's going to be a little bit easier to build up. And how it works is you need one stack of Bolt Charge, and then you can build it up and get more stacks by getting weapon damage. And then to activate it, you need to use an ability. Any element, doesn't have to be Arc, and that will call down a lightning strike that does the big damage. There is an exception to that lets you summon the Bolt Charge lightning bolt without using an ability, and we'll get into that in some of the new aspects in a minute. Biggest question here is how fast this happens and which weapons will do it the fastest. The Destiny Data Compendium's thrown in some values here. We're assuming it's counter based. I would imagine that automatic weapons are going to progress faster on average than like slower firing weapons, just because it kind of fits the vibe of Arc, be aggressive and fast and all that stuff. But we won't really see it till it comes out and people start doing some testing. This is going to be a game changer for raid and dungeon DPS. It's a whole nother damage facet that you can build up during damage phases and use. Ignitions are good, but you can't necessarily build them up unless you have a super or transcendence or something like that. Whereas this is just, you need your teammates to give you Bolt Charge, and then you can drop the damage on your enemies. Now, the other question is, how do you get Bolt Charge? And I've built you a great resource here. So first, our sources from subclasses. And I'm not going to read every single one of these because there is a lot. We have a new Titan Arc aspect called Storm's Keep, and that will give you anyone who is behind a barricade. We have a new Warlock Arc aspect, Ionic Sentry, grant Bolt Charge when the Sentry kills enemies. Other existing aspects, we have Tempest Strike for Hunters, we have Juggernaut for Titans, we have Lightning Surge for Warlocks. So those are all really solid ways. On top of that, they have updated the Melee's Disorienting Blow for Hunters and Ballistic Slam for Titans to get Bolt Charge. And then lastly, the Fragments Spark of Discharge, Momentum, Frequency, Bolts, Ions on Arc, and Facet of Purpose on Prismatic have all been updated to give various amounts of Bolt Charge. You can see exactly how they work here. I don't want to read it all to you. I trust that you can read. I will also say that my fragment reference tool is 100% up to date with all this information. Any updated fragments I have highlighted and made it very clear the bolt charge changes, so definitely refer to that. It's going to make build crafting and planning out your builds much easier. It'll be linked in the description. I've been sitting on this whole video because I wanted to see what they were doing with arc armors and weapons. And part of this is the exotic weapons that can give you bolt charge. We have 3. We have Ward Cliff Coil, which will grant bolt charges to all nearby allies when you fire the rockets, and basically your whole team will get 4 stacks per trigger pull. We have Cloud Strike, which give bolt charge to you on rapid precision hits, and will give you more bolt charge if you get a precision final blow. And then lastly, we have the original lightning exotic weapon, Thunderlord. Final blows of this weapon are going to generate a lightning strike. When that lightning strike hits, you get stacks of bolt charge. So this is going to be amazing for ad clear. Not necessarily the best for boss damage, but if you have another way of getting bolt charge, I'm sure that rapid firing machine gun is going to do very good. Now, moving into the subclass specific arc changes, we have Hunter. Tempest Strike now grants bolt charge on killing a jolted enemy, and it gets plus 57% extra damage. That's a humongous buff. Disorienting Blow is finally useful. It's going to give bolt charge on hit, has an AoE damage around the person you hit, and the blind radius is increased up to 9.6 meters. Arc Staff, if you block with it, will give you bolt charge. I think that is very niche and not very useful. My favorite buff though is to the new aspect that was added in the final shape, Ascension. It now has 3 fragment slots, which no arc aspect has so far, and will activate Gambler's Dodge, Marksman's Dodge, Powering Dodge on Prismatic, and Threaded Spectre. And in case you didn't know, Ascension gives you and your nearby allies Amplified, which is 15% damage resistance and lower enemy targeting to you and all your nearby allies for 15 seconds. And you can spam dodges so frequently. These are just fantastic changes. Being able to get your melee back while you're doing an Ascension is so good. And on Prismatic, I'm really looking forward to activating things like Threaded Spectre while also doing Ascension at the same time. Some just rough recommended builds. Raiju's Harness with Ascension and Flow State is really good now. It's going to be even better then. Raid Flux with Tempest Strike and Flow State is going to be really fun, active melee build that goes straight into that super really quickly. Gifted Conviction was made for Ascension, and it's going to be much better. And now you can pair Ascension and Tempest Strike together because those will both be very strong. So I have a more in-depth build for that later, but I'll get into it at the end of the video. Moving over to Titan, most of our buffs come on the Juggernaut aspect. This gets bolt charge now, and it's when the overshield from Juggernaut blocks damage, you'll get the bolt charge. You also get a little bit more damage resistance to splash damage. Just generally made this a little bit useful. Another thing that was buffed is Ballistic Slam. This is the sprint and dive from the air melee attack. Sprint time requirements down. The damage scales based on your distance traveled. Damage versus PvE commands is buffed by 30%. And then every enemy that's damaged by Ballistic Slam gets a stack of bolt charge. So if you flew down into a group of 10 enemies, you can get a full bolt charge stack immediately. And that's just really good. Now, one thing I forgot to mention about bolt charge earlier that is a little bit more minor to me, but may end up being great, is that bolt charge, every time you gain a stack, will give you melee ability energy. And on something like Ballistic Slam, that's fantastic. That means you could potentially get your full melee back just for doing a slam on enough enemies. So it's a really good loop. Now, some recommended builds I'm thinking about here. All these would be using Juggernaut and Knockout for your aspects, but Curse of the Falling Star, because that will get your super back based on melee kills, and Insurmountable Skull Fort, which is actually just announced to be getting buffed to have a little bit more uptime and a little bit more reliable returns with Heresy. But I will cover exotic changes in a different video. Now, we're also getting a new Arc Titan aspect, so let me briefly just play the preview clip from Bungie. So what this does is you drop a barricade and then you and your allies get bolt charge behind it. And that's it. Once you have that bolt charge, you can build up more stacks and you can see how fast you get up to 10 here. And then the lightning will strike down when you do weapon damage. Not just ability damage, but when you do weapon damage. So Based on the video footage, it looks like when you cast the class ability, you're going to have 4 times bolt charge. It will also give you bolt charge over time, and as you deal damage, you also get bolt charge. It looks like in the gameplay, the player goes from 4 bolt charge to 10 in about 4 seconds. And it's also still unclear if allies also can trigger their bolt charge lightning detonation with weapon damage, or if that's just for the user. But all in all, while using this, you get a bolt charge detonation about every 6 to 7 seconds. Think about every damage phase you've ever been in and how many lightning bolts every player could get off with that. It's gonna be crazy damage. Now, a few recommended builds here to build into Storm's Keep. Curse of the Falling Star is just gonna be, it's already a fantastic boss damage exotic. Pair it with Knockout and Storm's Keep, and you've just got a perfect setup for damage phases. Armamentarium for ranged arc play, I think it's going to be really strong, pairing Touch of Thunder and Storm's Keep. Heart of Inmost Light for ability looping, also with Touch of Thunder and Storm's Keep. Just making sure you can do that barricade as often as possible while also throwing out a lot of grenades and melees. Hazardous Propulsion is a barricade exotic. It gives you damage whenever you cast your barricade, so I think that can be really strong. Once again, Touch of Thunder and Storm's Keep. If you want a more running gun build, you might try Precious Scars and use Thruster instead, because you still will get on Thruster, just a smaller area, and that lets you run, heal. Another one here that might work is Eternal Warrior, because that will give you the arc weapon surges and give you some boosts to Fists of Havoc. Now, moving over to arc changes for Warlock. We've got another buff to Storm Trance, boosting its damage by 20% to non-champion enemies. Chaos Reach is getting a buff to non-champion enemies by 15%. Lightning Surge no longer amplifies on cast, which sounds like a bummer, but it's so easy to get multi-kills with it that you're going to get amplified anyways. But it will give bolt charge for each enemy hit with Lightning Surge. And in add dense activities, that's a lot of bolt charge. Also getting its damage increased by 30%, which I frankly think is crazy, but I'm very excited about. This aspect's really underrated. It's already good, and this is just going to take it to a completely different level. On Prismatic Warlock, I think this is going to be an aspect that becomes a lot more popular because equipping it will let you get amplified, and using it is a very easy way to get amplified if you have trash enemies. It's very easy to get a triple kill and then suddenly, boom, amplified, 15% damage resistance for 15 seconds. Some recommended builds that I'm thinking about here are Geomatic Stabilizers on Chaos Reach. These are massively buffed in Heresy, and I will talk about that in my next video. Storm Dancer's Brace Storm Trance. Lightning Surge is going to be really nice for building up that super quickly. And then also having a really strong Storm Trance, because Storm Dancer's Brace is also going to be buffed in Heresy. It's just really good. Still sticking with Arc, Necrotic Grips might make Lightning Surge even better. There's just a lot of great things to do here. Now, Titans are not the only ones that are getting a new Arc aspect. Warlocks are also getting one. You basically build this up like Gunpowder Gamble on Hunters, then you throw it out and it's going to blind enemies. And then it might be able to jolt enemies if you have the Spark of Shock fragment. So we'll see what happens, but I think this could be really good. And just a reminder again, it's going to give you bolt charges every time it kills an enemy. How it's charged, according to the article, is you defeat targets with arc abilities or weapons, it'll charge up. Very similar to Gunpowder Gamble. And then when you activate your grenade, it's going to get thrown out there and it's going to be buffed. This very much looks like it works like Gunpowder Gamble. It does not use a grenade charge, and it will likely have every available grenade buff. So things like Verity's Brow should be able to buff the damage of this, which I'm very excited about. One thing I've noticed on Arc a lot is that people underrate Blind. Blind is so useful. It's intrinsic unstoppable counter, and it just stops most enemies in their track. In the gameplay, it does look like there's about a 7-second cooldown after you've thrown it out before generating a new one, so that will just be something to keep in mind. And that's pretty normal. Gunpowder Gamble has a lockout too. A few recommended builds with this, and all will be using Electrostatic Mine and Ionic Sentry as aspects. Getaway Artist for double buddies. Verity's Brow for doubling the damage on Ionic Sentries. Verity's Brow is also getting buffed with episode Heresy. Crown of Tempest is amazing for ability spam. It just keeps you constantly regenerating those abilities. And then Vesper of Radius, because that makes your Rift blind. And then with this, you have a grenade ability that blinds. and you can just have tons of sources of blind, so you can control the whole field, which I think is a really cool playstyle for Warlock, especially if you like things like Bleak Watcher. Some Void subclass updates we have. Unbreakable is getting several buffs. It's going to charge the damage and the Void Overshield faster. Max damage is boosted by 20%. The shield has even more health. And the Throw Blast is only going to cost 50% grenade energy instead of 100%, which is just going to give you even more uptime on it. It is catching one minor nerf. While Sentinel Shield is equipped, Orb Creation cooldown is going to be increased from 1 second to 4 seconds. But I think it is mostly a niche use case. This, I think, should help this aspect a lot. The charge time is way too slow on this, and it already does great damage, and it will now be able to do another 20% more damage, which is really good, while also not using up quite as much grenade charge. Another Titan buff is Ward of Dawn now weakens. This is a nice little buff. It's gonna, in some fights, make it a little bit better than well, because you will get a total damage boost. So I think that's really good. Now, on Warlocks, the Chaos Accelerant Warlock aspect, specifically when you use Magnetic Grenade and get handheld Supernova, is getting buffed. The projectile count is going from 5 to 9. The width of the cone is bigger. The height of the blast cone is also increased. This is potentially an 80% damage boost, but it's a much wider spread. If they got a large enemy, all that will hit, and it's just a straight up damage boost, but it's also going to let you clear out crowds with this, which I think is pretty cool. Now, Void Hunters didn't get much subclass updates, but they are getting a new aspect called On the Prowl. How this works is when you go invisible, an enemy is marked for your whole team. When they are killed, a cloud appears, and if you or your team jumps through it, they become invisible. So it basically gives you like a mini game so that your team can work on destroying enemies and get buffed out of it. On top of it, you get ability energy back and a buff every time this happens. So really cool loop. I think for ad clear encounters and stuff, it's just gonna be really great, and it's gonna be great team support, and will also give you some survivability thanks to invisibility. So just summarizing that again, we just talked about it, but go invisible, mark an enemy, you defeat them, and you get stacks. As they're defeated, you and nearby allies get increased weapon reload speed, stability, and you are granted grenade, melee, and class ability energy. Now, how good this is completely depends on how much ability energy and how much stat boosts those are. We just don't know. We'll hopefully find out pretty quickly once Heresy launches, but that's the big question. I hope it launches really good. I think there's a great playstyle. We don't have enough that lets invisibility give us something other than just survivability, so this is going to be really fun. Now, some recommended builds for this. Falcon Hunter makes a lot of sense. You're just going to be going in and out of invisibility constantly. Might be a little bit hard to kick off your loop though, because you won't be able to equip the aspects Trapper's Ambush or Vanishing Step, so you're going to have to maybe rely on your Smoke Bomb or weapon to get you into that Falcon loop. For solo play, Graviton Forfeit will let this extend your invisibility even more, give you more ability energy, and just really keep you in invisibility almost all the time. For teammates though, Omnioculus I think is the best option. Running with Trapper's Ambush, you get maximum melees, you get melee recharge from it and from On the Prowl. You get team damage resistance while invisibility, and you have an extra way to make your allies invisible. Moving over to solar subclass updates, there's not a lot here. Radiant damage bonus is being reduced from 25% to 20%. This is a bummer, but that buff is insane. It makes Radiant so required, so reducing this just a little bit I think will soften that a little bit. Well is completely unchanged. It still will do 25% damage boost. Song of Flame will still just be giving Radiant, so that kind of differentiates the two a little bit. Now, on Titans, the Consecration aspect is finally getting its first nerf in a while. The Scorch Wave and Slam Wave damage is being reduced by 55%. Now, courtesy of the fantastic science community member Mossy Max, this is going to turn into about a 31% damage nerf on a single target. But on multiple enemies, the ignitions are going to hit each other, and it's only going to be a 21% nerf with 2 enemies, 16% nerf with 3 enemies, and it will continue to go down. Bungie did state they might nerf ignitions on Consecration a little bit more. Consecration currently has an intrinsic 20% boost to its ignition damage, So they might be coming for this again. All in all, I think Consecration's going to be just fine. It's already very strong. I don't think the problem has ever been damage. It's been uptime. On Prismatic, the uptime is crazy, and it makes it just an absurd ability. Our last subclass changes are for Stasis and Strand. The Stasis one I'm so excited for. Frost Armor, which is a new verb added with the final shape, is being buffed. Each stack will now go from 4.5% to 6.25% damage resistance. 5 stacks, which is your standard maximum, will be 31.25% damage resistance, which is really strong. 8 stacks, which you can only get by having Whisper of Rhyme on Stasis, will give you 50% damage resistance. That is the highest damage resistance that you can apply to your health in the entire game. Void Overshield is a little bit higher, but it only applies to the shield. Stasis just got so much tankier. Rhyme Stealer is an amazing perk. If you enhance this, you get 2 Frost Armor stacks per shatter. So 1 shatter is 12.5% damage resistance. That's almost as much as Amplified off of shattering a single crystal with your weapon when you have Enhanced Rhyme Stealer equipped. This is just amazing, and it's going to help keep Stasis really strong after this very Stasis focused episode. On Hunters, Ensnaring Slam is getting the same treatment as Ascension. It's going to activate Gambler's Dodge, Marksman Dodge, and Threaded Specters. It's a more useful aspect. Threaded Spectre is also getting a little PvE buff to compensate for some of the PvP nerfs that affected PvE. And the clone's damage resistance is going to go up from 40 to 70%. That should be really good because those clones will only make the threadlings when they self-detonate, not when they're shot too much to be destroyed. So that's a great change to make that aspect actually usable. I want to get into some recommended builds. I will recommend a build for all 3 subclasses on Arc, and then one more recommended build for Void Hunters because of the new aspect. So this recommended Archetype build wants to keep a constant loop of weapon damage and class abilities to build up your bolt charge. This is building into Storm's Keep, and we're going to use the exotic Heart of Inmost Light. With that, we're going to use Touch of Thunder and Storm's Keep. Our abilities, I recommend the Super Thunder Crash. It's just the best Arc Super for Titans. I then recommend Pulse Grenade because with Touch of Thunder, it will give you lots of Ionic traces and it's very strong. It does have a 62.5% flat gain factor, which is disappointing. Thunderclap's is my favorite Arc melee. It's just very good. It has a 90% flat gain factor, but it hits hard and has a good little cone of AoE. Your class ability can either be Thruster or Rally Barricade. If you're taking a slower encounter, do Rally Barricade. If you are on the move a lot, use Thruster. Over under Fragments, we want to take Spark of Shock so that our Arc Grenades jolt. We want to take Spark of Magnitude so those Pulse Grenades last longer. You get 2 extra pulses. We're going to take Spark of Discharge so our Arc Weapon kills will also make Ionic traces, and then it will also make it so every time we get one of those Ionic traces, we will gain Bolt Charge, and that works really well with Touch of Thunder and Pulse Grenades because those generate a lot of Ionic traces back to you. Our last fragment slot will be Spark of Frequency, and this will give you an extra stack of Bolt Charge as long as you have Amplified up, which we should have up constantly, so you'll gain Bolt Charge twice as fast. Just really want to build into that new verb and see how it works. Now, one honorable mention is Spark of Beacons, and this lets your special and heavy ammo arc weapons blind enemies whenever you get a kill, as long as you are amplified. So that's just very strong. If you're struggling with survivability, that might be a good option. Now, as for the mods in the build, you want to set up your mods to make orbs, boost your weapon damage, and regen class ability. And your armor stats, resilience and discipline at max, and then get as much recovery and strength as you can, and intellect just to 30. I will have a dim link for this in the description, so definitely check that out if you're interested. It'll have notes in it, tell you what you're going to need to change on Heresy because we don't have all the stuff quite yet. Moving over to Warlocks, I wanted to make a build using the Ionic Sentry, and the build I'm most excited about right now is having Constant Blind. So we're going to use the exotic Vesper of Radius that makes our Rift blind. We are going to use a Flashbang Grenade because then our grenade blinds. We're going to use Ionic Sentry because that will blind on a special extra grenade. And then we're also going to use Spark of Beacons so that our special arc weapon kills will also blind. We have 4 sources of blinding. For aspects, we're going to take Electrostatic Mine so we can make Ionic Traces. Then we're going to take the Ionic Sentry so we have that bonus grenade that blinds. On our abilities, I like Chaos Reach, but you're flexible. You can take Storm Trance if you want. It should be pretty strong. We're going to take Flashbang Grenade because not only does this blind enemies, but it has the shortest cooldown of all arc grenades and the highest flat gain factor at 87.5%. For the melee, we're going to take Ball Lightning. It just does more damage, has a 70% flat gain factor, but really solid melee. And then for our class ability, we're going to take Healing Rift. Arc subclasses do not have a lot of healing built in, so having a rift that heals is just valuable. For our fragments, we're going to take Spark of Shock because that will make our arc grenade jolt on hit. That should also make Ionic Sentry jolt too, but we haven't seen this yet. We're going to take Spark of Discharge because that will make those Ionic traces that we make pretty frequently give us Bolt Charge. And then we're going to take Spark of Beacons because that's how we get our Blinding Blast on our special arc weapon kills. Lastly, we're going to take Spark of Frequency, and this is because we get an extra stack of Bolt Charge. And the whole goal of this is that we're blinding enemies, gaining Bolt Charge. But if one of these fragments doesn't work for you, I recommend Spark of Resistance because it's 25% damage resistance when you're within 15 meters of at least 3 enemies. Very good, very solid on arc. Damage resistance is never a bad idea. For mods, we are going to build into super energy / orbs. So we want all of our abilities to possibly generate orbs. That's using firepower, heavy-handed, reaper. And we also want to boost our arc weapon damage because we'll be using an arc special weapon pretty frequently. For the armor stats, max out resilience, max out discipline, get as much recovery as you can, then strength comes after that, and then just get intellect at 30. Moving over to Hunter for a recommended arc build. So this is a gifted conviction build like I was talking about earlier. We want to stack amplified damage resistance with the gifted conviction damage resistance. Then we constantly want to spam jolting bombs between Tempest Strike, one of our aspects, and Ascension. So both those will shoot out the arc bombs from gifted conviction. Both will jolt enemies, and both will give us damage resistance. On top of that, between these two abilities, we will gain Bolt Charge from Tempest Strike and Amplified from Ascension constantly. So we'll have extra damage resistance and a constant source of extra ability energy. For a super, I recommend Gathering Storm. It's my favorite of the arc supers, but very flexible here. We are once again going to use flashbang grenades because they have the shortest cooldown for arc grenades and an 87.5% flat gain factor. Our melee, we want to take Combination Blow because we want the shortest cooldown melee ability for Tempest Strike. It also has a 100% flat gain factor. And lastly, we want Gambler's Dodge to take advantage of the Ascension buff so that when we do Ascension near an enemy, which we almost always will do because that's what it's for, we get our melee back. So we can do Ascension, go straight into a Tempest Strike, and then hopefully before too long, thanks to Amplified, we have our dodge back up and we can repeat the loop. Over on our fragments, we want to take Spark of Resistance to get more damage resistance to stack with Gifted Conviction and Amplified. We'll take Spark of Amplitude because that will generate us more orbs as we get rapid kills while amplified. Spark of Discharge, you might be seeing this a lot, but whenever you get Ionic Trace, you get Bolt Charge, and that's just a really great way to start off your loop. And then we're going to take Spark of Ions, which will give us an extra Bolt Charge whenever we get an Ionic Trace. And then lastly, because we have 5 fragment slot thanks to the buff to Ascension, take Spark of Frequency, which gives us an extra stack of Bolt Charge when you gain any Bolt Charge. Lastly, if one of these fragments doesn't work for you, try out Spark of Focus, because while you're sprinting, it will give you plus 150% base class ability regen, which is really good and will help keep our loop going constantly, so keep that in mind. For our mods, we're going to focus on dodge regen and orb generation. We just want to keep that dodge going up because it's kind of the kickstart of our loop, and then just orbs are generally useful and we'll keep everything kind of moving. For our armor stats, max out resilience, max out discipline, get mobility to 50 so that when amplified your mobility is effectively 100, then get as much recovery as you can, and strength and intellect just go to 30. Moving over to our recommended Void Hunter build, I'm going with Omni Oculus here, as I want to constantly loop that, get a lot of ability regen back, and have damage resistance and support the team. So generally want to always be invisible and just regenerate as much ability as possible. So we use Omni Oculus. This gives 25% damage resistance while invisible to you or allies if you cloak them. It will also give you an extra melee charge and refund some melee ability energy when you cloak allies. It remains to be seen whether cloaking allies via on the Prowl counts, but I hope it does. For our aspects, we're going to take the new aspect on the Prowl and Trapper's Ambush. Our snare bombs will also cloak allies or ourselves. Now for your abilities, your super, I recommend Mobius Quiver, but once again, it's very flexible. Jury's still out on Spectral Blades. It's not the best super still. For your grenade, I recommend Scatter Grenade. It's one of the shortest cooldown grenades on Void and has a 75% flat gain factor. Our melee, we only have a single option, and it is Snare Bomb, but it's very good and has a 90% flat gain factor. Lastly, on our dodge, we want to take Gambler's Dodge because we're trying to use our melee a lot. We want to use that constantly to get our melee back. It has an 80% flat gain factor. On our fragments, we're going to take Echo of Starvation. This will give us Devour when we pick up an Orb of Power or Void Breach. This is the main source of survivability for Void Titans and Void Hunters. Echo of Undermining lets our Void Grenades weaken, which can help kick off our loop and just help us with larger enemy DPS. Echo of Harvest will create a Orb of Power and a Void Breach when kill a weakened enemy. So that's just two ways to win and will give us a reliable way to get Echo of Starvation procced. Lastly, we're going to take Echo of Persistence, which will increase the duration of Devour, Invisibility, and Void Overshield. We'll be using Devour and Invisibility a lot, and hopefully we can find somewhere with weapons to get Void Overshield. Some honorable mentions for fragments. Echo of Instability will give you volatile rounds when you get a grenade kill. That can be very good if you can reliably get grenade kills just to get some more AoE damage. And then Echo of Reprisal is just a great fragment that gives you super energy when surrounded by an enemy. On the mod side, we just want to focus on Void weapon damage and class ability regen so we can keep everything looping and deal good damage as we come out of invisibility so we can keep reprocking on the Prowl. On the armor stats side, we want to max resilience and discipline, put as much into recovery as we can, then mobility, and then just keep strength and intellect at 30. And that's pretty much it for the video. It's been a long one, but it's so much information to cover. I originally wanted to fit the exotic armor preview into this video, but it's just become so long. I'll be doing a separate video on the exotic buffs. I did want to at least read that article before I made this just so I could give you accurate information, and I don't recommend something that doesn't work or will be much better once we can explain the exotic armor changes. In summary, here, Arc is already good. I think Arc's pretty solid right now, but it's going to get much better, especially thanks to the damage resistance on Amplified. Bolt Charge is a whole extra damage factor for DPS. It's going to, I think, shake up the DPS meta a good bit and just make general gameplay really fun. I really like the concept of it. New aspects, Arc ones for Titan and Warlock, and a Void one for Hunter, are going to really refresh these subclasses, and I think they're going to be really great as long as they haven't launched them too weak. But we will see when they come out. I'm very excited to build craft with all of these. Aspects are such a great thing, and I think these aspects are very top notch. I think they're a little bit above and beyond what we even got in the final shape, and those were all pretty solid aspects. That's been a lot of talking. I appreciate it if you listen to this. If you don't know, the slides for this for quick reference will be in the description. Refer to those if you're not able to watch the whole video or you just want a quick reference, because that Twit article is very long, and having a single page or some more organized information might be a little bit more helpful. Let me know what you think. Let me know what builds you're thinking about. I have a Discord server, which I will also link, and it's been really great talking with people about builds and really just like posting through these new articles as they come out and just getting excited. So definitely join. If you've made it all the way here, thank you so much for the support. Have a great one.